Today we have a story about courage born from desperation, about two souls who refused to be prey, and about the night the natural order of cruelty was turned upon its head. This account was found among the private papers of a deceased county clerk in eastern Texas, written in faded ink on pages that had been hidden between the floorboards of an old office building scheduled for demolition. The handwriting suggests it was copied from an earlier testimony, perhaps destroyed, perhaps simply lost to time's indifference. If you enjoyed this story, consider subscribing and becoming part of our community. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. We love hearing from our amazing viewers all around the world. Before we begin, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're listening from and the exact time right now. We're deeply interested in knowing how far and at what times of day or night these documented stories that time tried to erase reach. The woman's name was Delilah Freeman. The man was called Nathaniel Ward. Both had been enslaved on separate plantations in Louisiana until the spring of 1856, when they made their separate escapes within days of each other. Fate or Providence brought them together at a river crossing in Arkansas, and they continued north together, moving only by darkness, sleeping in caves and abandoned structures, eating what they could forage or steal. They were careful people. Nathaniel had worked as a blacksmith and understood tools, locks, and the mechanics of things. Delilah had served in the main house and knew how white folks thought, how they spoke, what pleased them and what enraged them. Together they made a formidable pair, and for 3 weeks they evaded every danger. But in eastern Texas, near a town whose name has been scratched from this record, they encountered a man named Victor Crowley. Crowley was a professional slave hunter, one of the most successful in 5 counties. He traveled with 2 associates, a thin, silent man called Pike, and a younger man named Raymond Glass who laughed too often and too loudly. They had dogs, 4 of them, kept hungry and mean. Crowley advertised his services in newspapers and took payment by percentage, 20% of the assessed value for a successful return. He had never lost a hunt. The 3 men picked up Delilah and Nathaniel's trail near a creek where they had stopped to wash and rest. It was early evening. The dogs caught the scent and began their howling, and Crowley smiled the way men smile when money is close. What Crowley did not know was that Delilah and Nathaniel had heard the dogs from a distance. They had climbed a ridge and watched through the trees as the 3 men made camp, as they fed the dogs and drank whiskey and spoke of the reward money with absolute certainty. Nathaniel turned to Delilah in the growing darkness and said something that would later be recorded in this fragmentary testimony. "They hunt us like animals. Perhaps it is time they learned what it means to be prey." Delilah looked at him for a long moment, then she nodded. That night, while Crowley and his men slept, confident in their dogs and their guns and their unquestioned authority, Delilah and Nathaniel did not run. They waited in the shadows at the edge of camp, watching, planning, preparing to do what fear and fury and the simple human need for dignity demanded. The record notes that what followed would be spoken of in whispers for decades, though no official report was ever filed. It notes that the hunters became the hunted. And it notes, in a careful hand, that sometimes the cruelest lessons are learned too late. The dogs were the first to die. Nathaniel had fashioned a crude weapon from a broken axe handle and a shard of iron he'd carried since Louisiana. He moved like smoke through the camp while Pike snored and Raymond muttered in his sleep. Crowley lay on his back, hat over his face, one hand resting on his rifle. The dogs were chained to a tree 20 paces from the men. Nathaniel approached from downwind, silent as prayer. The first dog lifted its head and growled low, but before it could bark, Nathaniel was upon it. The strike was swift and soundless. One by one, he killed them all. Delilah watched from the tree line, her heart a hammer in her chest. When Nathaniel returned, his hands were shaking. "It's done," he whispered. "Now we take their guns," Delilah said. They crept into the camp. Raymond had left his rifle propped against a saddle 3 feet from where he slept. Delilah lifted it with trembling fingers. It was heavier than she'd imagined. Pike's shotgun lay beside him, his hand resting on the barrel. Nathaniel crouched and slowly eased the weapon free. Crowley's rifle was another matter. He slept with it across his chest. Nathaniel met Delilah's eyes in the darkness. She shook her head. Too dangerous. They retreated into the woods with 2 guns and began to put distance between themselves and the camp. An hour before dawn, Crowley woke to silence. The dogs were not barking. The night was utterly still. He sat up and his hand instinctively reached for his rifle, still there. He exhaled, but something felt wrong. The air itself seemed to be holding its breath. He stood and walked toward the tree where the dogs had been chained. All 4 lay dead, their necks broken, their eyes open and glassy in the early light. Crowley stared at them for a long moment. Then he turned and shouted, waking Pike and Raymond. "Check your weapons," he barked. Raymond scrambled to his saddle and found nothing. Pike reached beside him and came up empty-handed. "They were here," Pike said quietly. His voice had no expression, but his face had gone pale. "They were in camp while we slept." Crowley's jaw tightened. He looked around the clearing, scanning the tree line, and for the first time in his long career, a cold thread of unease coiled in his gut. "They've got 2 guns now," Raymond said. His voice had lost its mocking edge. "2 guns and darkness," Pike added. Crowley spat into the dirt. "We still got 1 rifle and 3 men. They're still runaways. We move at first light." But as he spoke, he heard it. A low whistle, long and mournful, drifting from somewhere deep in the forest. Then another, closer. Raymond spun toward the sound, gripping his knife. What the hell was that? No one answered. The whistle came again, from a different direction this time. And in the silence that followed, Crowley felt something he had never felt before. He felt like prey. They walked in silence through the forest as the sun climbed overhead. Crowley led, jaw set, scanning the trees. Pike followed with his knife drawn, moving like a ghost. Raymond brought up the rear, flinching at every snapped twig. There was no trail to follow now. Delilah and Nathaniel had vanished into the wilderness like water into sand. By midday, they reached a narrow ravine choked with brambles and fallen logs. Crowley paused at the edge, studying the terrain. The trees pressed close here, their branches forming a canopy that swallowed the light. "We should go around," Raymond said. His voice was thin. "We go through," Crowley said. "They could be a mile ahead by now." They descended into the ravine. The air grew cool and damp. Water trickled somewhere nearby, hidden beneath the undergrowth. The walls of earth rose steeply on either side. Halfway through, Pike stopped. "Listen," he said. They froze. At first there was nothing, just the rustle of leaves and the distant call of a crow. Then they heard it, a scraping sound, rhythmic and deliberate, like metal dragged across stone. It came from above them. Crowley looked up. Through the gaps in the canopy, he saw nothing but branches and sky. The scraping stopped. "Keep moving," he muttered. They pressed forward, boots squelching in mud. The ravine seemed to stretch endlessly. Raymond kept glancing over his shoulder, breathing too fast. Then, without warning, something dropped from the trees. It landed in the mud 10 feet behind Raymond. A rope noose, tied with careful precision, swaying gently in the still air. Raymond shouted and stumbled backward. Pike whirled around, knife raised. "What the hell?" Another noose dropped, this time in front of Crowley, then another to his left. 3 nooses, hanging at eye level, turning slowly. "They're playing with us," Pike said quietly. Crowley stared at the rope, his face hard as stone, but his hand trembled as he pushed the noose aside. "Move," he said, "now." They scrambled out of the ravine, hearts pounding, and emerged into a clearing where the sunlight felt like salvation. Raymond bent over, hands on his knees, gasping. "This ain't right," he said. "This ain't natural." "They're just niggers," Crowley snapped, but his voice lacked conviction. Pike said nothing. He was staring at the tree line where the shadows seemed too deep, too watchful. That evening, they made camp in an open space with clear sightlines in every direction. No fire. They ate dried meat in silence and took turns keeping watch. At midnight, Raymond woke to the sound of breathing. Not his own, not Pike's or Crowley's. Someone else. He sat up slowly, hand reaching for his knife. The breathing continued, low, steady, impossibly close. He turned his head. Standing at the edge of the clearing, just beyond the reach of the moonlight, was a figure. A woman. Delilah. She stood perfectly still, her eyes fixed on him, her face expressionless. Raymond's breath caught in his throat. He tried to speak, to shout, but no sound came. She raised one hand and pointed at him. Then she stepped backward into the darkness and disappeared. When Raymond finally found his voice and woke the others, they searched the tree line and found nothing. No footprints, no broken branches, no sign that anyone had been there at all. Except for one thing. Carved into the bark of a nearby tree were 3 words, fresh and deep. "You are hunted." Morning came cold and gray. None of them had slept. Raymond sat with his back against a tree, eyes red-rimmed and wild. Pike sharpened his knife in slow, methodical strokes, his face empty of emotion. Crowley stared into the distance, jaw clenched, calculating. "We're going back," Raymond said suddenly. "I'm done. This ain't worth no reward." "You run, you don't get paid," Crowley said. "I don't care." "You should." Raymond stood abruptly. "You didn't see her last night, standing there like a damn ghost. She pointed at me, Victor, pointed right at me like she was marking me for death." "She's trying to scare you," Crowley said, "and it's working." "Maybe we should be scared," Pike said quietly. Both men turned to look at him. Pike never spoke unless he had something worth saying. "They killed 4 dogs without waking us," he continued. "Took our guns from under our noses. They're watching us right now, I'd bet my life on it, and we're stumbling through these woods like blind men." He paused. "This ain't a hunt anymore, it's a game, and we're losing." Crowley stood, his face flushed with anger. "I've been hunting runaways for 15 years. I've tracked men through swamps and mountains. I've caught them all. Every last one. You think 2 niggers are gonna make me quit?" "These 2 are different," Pike said. "They're still just." A gunshot split the air. The bullet struck the tree 6 inches from Crowley's head, spraying bark and splinters. All 3 men dropped to the ground, scrambling for cover. Another shot. This one hit the dirt between Pike and Raymond. "Where are they?" Raymond screamed. Crowley scanned the tree line, rifle raised, searching for movement, for smoke, for anything. Nothing. The forest was silent again. Then Nathaniel's voice rang out, deep and clear, echoing from somewhere in the trees. "You hunted us for money. We hunt you for our lives. The difference is, we have nothing left to lose." Crowley fired blindly into the woods. The shot echoed and died. No response. Minutes passed, then an hour. They waited, crouched and trembling, but no more shots came. When they finally stood, Raymond was shaking so badly he could barely hold his knife. "I want to go home," he whispered. Crowley said nothing. For the first time in 15 years, he didn't know what to do. That afternoon they found Pike's horse dead, its throat cut, lying in a clearing they had passed through that morning. The saddle had been removed. The saddlebags were gone, food, water, ammunition, all of it. On the horse's flank, carved with a knife, was a single word. "Soon." Raymond sat down in the dirt and put his head in his hands. Pike stood very still, staring at the dead animal. Crowley turned in a slow circle, searching the trees, knowing they were being watched. "Show yourselves," he shouted. "Face us like men." His voice echoed and faded. Then from the shadows came Delilah's voice, soft and cold. "You never saw us as human. Why would we fight like men?" The words hung in the air like smoke. And in that moment, Victor Crowley understood that he was not going to collect his reward. He understood that he might not leave these woods at all. And he understood, with a certainty that turned his blood to ice, that the hunted had become the hunters. They walked through the night, too afraid to stop. Raymond had stopped speaking entirely. Pike moved like a man in a trance. Crowley gripped his rifle so tightly his knuckles had gone white. The forest seemed endless. Every tree looked the same. Every shadow held a threat. At dawn, they stumbled into a clearing and found a campsite. Cold fire, scattered belongings, signs of recent occupation. Their own campsite. From 2 nights before. "We've been walking in circles," Pike said flatly. Raymond made a sound between a laugh and a sob. "They're herding us, like cattle." Crowley's face twisted with fury. He fired 3 shots into the air, the reports cracking like thunder. "Enough," he roared. "Enough games. You want us dead, then come and do it. Stop hiding like cowards." The echo faded. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then Nathaniel stepped out from behind a tree 30 yards away. He held the shotgun they'd stolen, aimed at the ground. His face was calm. "We are not cowards," he said. "We are survivors." Crowley raised his rifle. "Don't," Nathaniel said quietly. "You fire that shot and you'll never know where she is. And Delilah is a better shot than I am." Crowley hesitated. "You've been hunting people for 15 years, Nathaniel continued. Families, mothers, children. You sold them back into chains for money. You slept well at night, didn't you?" "That's the law," Crowley said. His voice shook. "The law is not justice," Nathaniel said, "and you are learning that now." "What do you want?" Crowley demanded. "We want you to feel what we felt," Nathaniel said. "Every day, every hour, the fear, the exhaustion, the knowledge that something is hunting you, that you will never be safe, that the world sees you as less than human. You can't." "We already have," Nathaniel said. He took a step forward. "You have 1 rifle and no food, no water, no dogs, no horses. You are 3 days deep in country you don't know, and you have been walking in circles, and we are still here, watching, waiting." Raymond suddenly bolted. He ran blindly into the woods, crashing through undergrowth, sobbing and screaming. Pike started after him, but Nathaniel raised the shotgun. "Let him go," he said. Pike froze. He looked at Crowley, who stood rigid, rifle still raised. "You can follow him if you want," Nathaniel said to Pike. "But if you do, you'll die tired." Pike slowly lowered his knife. Raymond's screams grew distant, then stopped abruptly. A single gunshot echoed through the trees. Then silence. Crowley's face drained of color. "That was Delilah," Nathaniel said quietly. "She doesn't miss." Pike dropped his knife in the dirt. His hands were shaking. "What do you want from us?" he whispered. Nathaniel studied them both for a long moment. "I want you to walk south," he said. "And I want you to tell every slave hunter, every lawman, every man who makes his living from our suffering, what happened here. I want you to tell them that 2 people you hunted turned and fought back, and I want you to tell them that you failed." "You're letting us go," Crowley said. There was disbelief in his voice. "We're letting you live," Nathaniel corrected. "There's a difference. You walk south for 2 days, you don't stop, you don't look back, and if we ever hear that you've taken another hunting contract, we will find you, and next time there will be no warning." He stepped backward into the trees. "Start walking," his voice came from the shadows. "Now." Crowley and Pike stood frozen for a heartbeat. Then they turned south and began to walk. What follows is the testimony given by Elias Pike to a minister in Arkansas 3 weeks later. The minister, a man named Reverend Thomas Milhouse, recorded Pike's words exactly as spoken and sealed the document with a note that read, I do not know if this account is true or fevered invention, but the man who spoke it believed every word. Pike's testimony. We walked for 2 days without stopping. Victor kept the rifle trained behind us the whole time, but nothing came. No shots, no voices, just silence and the sound of our own footsteps. On the 3rd morning, we reached a creek and drank until we were sick. Victor said we should keep moving, but I couldn't. My feet were bleeding. My head was spinning. We made camp and slept like dead men. I woke at dusk to find Victor sitting upright, staring at something in the dirt. It was a piece of paper, folded and weighted down with a stone. I asked him what it said, but he wouldn't answer. His hands were shaking so badly he couldn't hold the rifle steady. I took the paper from him and read it. It said, "Raymond Glass died running. You walk because we allow it. Remember this, remember us, and never hunt again." Below the words were 2 names, written clear and careful: Delilah Freeman, Nathaniel Ward. Victor Crowley has not spoken since that day. He sits in his room and stares at the wall. The doctor says his mind is broken. I came here to confess because I know what we did. I know the evil we served. I told the Reverend everything because someone needs to know that those 2 people, those 2 souls we hunted like animals, they became something we couldn't stop. They became a reckoning. I don't know if they're still out there. I don't know if they made it to freedom. But I know this: every slave hunter who hears this story will think twice before taking another contract. Because Delilah, Freeman and Nathaniel Ward taught us that the hunted can become the hunters. And they taught us what it means to be prey. The testimony ends there. Reverend Millhouse's notes indicate that Pike left the next morning and was never seen again. A separate document discovered in the same archive references a report filed with the Texas Rangers concerning the deaths of Raymond Glass and the mental collapse of Victor Crowley. The report was marked inconclusive and filed away. No further action was taken. No one went looking for Delilah Freeman or Nathaniel Ward. Perhaps they were afraid of what they might find. Among the archived papers was a letter, undated and unsigned, written in a woman's hand. The handwriting analysis suggests it was composed sometime in the summer of 1856. The letter was never sent. It reads, "To whoever finds this, my name is Delilah Freeman, though that is not the name I was born with. The name I was given in bondage died when I crossed the river into Arkansas. Nathaniel Ward and I walk as free people now, or as free as 2 black souls can be in this country that calls itself civilized while it buys and sells human beings like livestock. I write this because the story must be told, even if it is never believed. We did not set out to become killers. We wanted only to live, to breathe without permission, to sleep without fear. But Victor Crowley and his men made that impossible. They hunted us with dogs and guns and the full weight of the law behind them, and they expected us to run until we dropped or until they caught us and dragged us back in chains. We chose a different path. Nathaniel had been beaten so many times his back was a map of scars. I had been touched by men who believed my body was their property. We had watched children sold away from their mothers. We had seen men hanged for the crime of reading. We had lived in a world that told us every single day that we were less than human. So when the hunters came for us, we decided to teach them what it feels like. We killed Raymond Glass because he would have killed us without hesitation. He died running. Just like so many of us have died running, I do not regret it. I cannot afford regret. We let Victor Crowley and Elias Pike live because we wanted them to carry the story. We wanted every man who profits from our suffering to know that we are not animals. We think, we plan, we fight back. And we win. Nathaniel and I continued north. We crossed into Kansas territory and then into Iowa. We found work. We found a small community of free black people who asked no questions about our past. We married in the winter of 1856. We built a life. But I still wake sometimes in the night, expecting to hear dogs barking. Nathaniel still looks over his shoulder when we walk through town. Freedom, we have learned, is not the absence of chains. It is the constant vigilance against those who would put them back on. I do not know who will read this letter or when, or if it will matter. But I write it so that someday someone will know we were here, we were human, we fought back. And for 3 days in a Texas forest, the hunters became the hunted. Let that be our testimony. Let that be our truth. The letter ends there. Beneath it in different handwriting is a single notation, received November 1856, filed without action. The final document in this collection is a newspaper clipping, yellowed and fragile, from the Kansas Free State newspaper dated March 1858. It is a brief notice, easily overlooked. Married on the 15th of February, Nathaniel Ward to Delilah Freeman, both of Lawrence. Mr. Ward is employed as a blacksmith. Mrs. Ward operates a small school for colored children. The community welcomes them. Below the clipping is a handwritten note from the county clerk, who originally compiled these papers. I came across this story by accident while organizing old territorial records. The testimony of Elias Pike had been misfiled among land deeds. The letter from Delilah Freeman was discovered inside a Bible donated to the county after the death of Reverend Millhouse. The newspaper clipping I found purely by chance. I do not know if these documents tell a true story or a legend that grew in the telling. I do not know if Delilah Freeman and Nathaniel Ward were heroes or murderers, or simply two desperate people trying to survive. But I know this. In 1856, two black people turned the tables on their hunters in a way that terrified men who believed themselves untouchable. Whether the details are accurate or embellished, the message is clear. Those we treat as less than human will not always accept that judgment. Those we hunt will not always run. And those we pursue with cruelty may someday turn and pursue us in return. I file this record not as legal evidence, but as historical testament. Let future generations judge it as they will. The notation is dated April 1893, 37 years after the events described. When the building was demolished in 1971, these papers were found sealed in a metal box beneath the floorboards. They were transferred to the County Historical Society, where they remained largely forgotten until being digitized as part of a routine archival project. The Society's catalog lists them simply as unverified testimony and correspondence circa 1856. Subject: fugitive slaves and slave hunters. Historical accuracy uncertain. But the words remain, preserved in faded ink and careful handwriting. The words of Delilah Freeman and Nathaniel Ward, who refused to be prey. The words of Elias Pike, who learned too late what it means to be hunted. And the words of an anonymous clerk who believed the story mattered, even if the world chose to forget. These are the voices that time tried to erase. These are the chronicles that survived anyway. This is the record of the night the hunted became the hunters. And this is where the archive closes, leaving us with one final question. How many other stories like this are still hidden, still waiting to be found, still whispering their truth from beneath the floorboards of history? The archive offers no answer. Only silence, and the fading echo of two names. Delilah Freeman, Nathaniel Ward. If this story moved you, we invite you again to share where in the world you're reading from, and at what hour these forgotten testimonies reached you. These stories belong to all of us, and your witness helps ensure they're never forgotten again.